Video recordings of this podcast can be found on raisingequity.org and Truth to Power on YouTube.
Earlier this month, 4 white women went into a Memphis mall wearing hoodies, which might seem like no big deal, but they did it in response to young Black men being handcuffed and detained for doing the same thing. I would call that leveraging your privilege. So using your identity and a part of your identity that gives you privilege to highlight a disparity in our society or some sort of mistreatment, and make clear how privilege operates in our society. So today we have with us Sherry Ennis, Rebecca Geller, Shannon Arthur, and Rye Estep. They are the women that I just mentioned, and thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that this conversation can help other people understand, what's behind actions like this. Like sometimes we see things on the news or going viral on Facebook, like your post did, and we wonder, like, okay, how did it come about? How did it happen? And hopefully it inspires other people to think about how they can act in their own spheres of influence. So can someone tell me how the action came about?
It was all Shannon's idea.
Yeah, I read about the incident at the mall, and it struck something in me that this is not okay. We know this goes on all the time, but it seemed like this time it went too far, especially because the gentleman who was a former reporter, Mr. McKenzie, bravely inserted himself into the situation by recording what was happening, and then he was targeted. And, if you've seen the video that he captured, you know what happened and how it's bewildering. So I can't stand the thought of that happening to my friends and my neighbors. And I just had this idea that seemed like maybe we could do something.
Mm-hmm. So it just hit you, it struck you. And it sounds like you know this person, or just feeling their common humanity, like this is wrong.
These are people in my community. This is our community.
But we've never met them. We just
we've
read
never
about
met
it.
Nope.
So Shannon posted on Facebook and said, "Hey, any of my white friends want to join me, and let's just go to the mall and all wear hoodies and just see what happens."
I'm like, I'm in.
We're in.
We're in.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so it was just the 3 of you that said you're in. Shannon, were there other people that said they were interested?
There were some maybe people. There were some people that wanted to come but had other obligations that evening and couldn't make it. There were several people, white mom friends, who said, "I don't want to get arrested. I'm not doing anything like that." And I said, "No, that's the point. We're not going to get arrested. Nothing is going to happen to us."
We all made jokes with our husbands about making sure they had bail money for us and their phones on them when we went to the mall. And
Oh, no joke. My husband had bail money. Yeah. Just in case, but we knew nothing was going to happen.
We really knew nothing was going to happen.
We knew nothing would likely happen, but things can go sideways really quick in Memphis.
That's true.
And, I told my husband and my boys, I said, just be prepared. I mean, because if we get confrontational, it's going to not end well. We did not get confrontational, but you never know.
You never know how it's going to get perceived.
Exactly.
Right. And I didn't think anything would happen if it was just us. But, we had no idea what else was happening at the mall that night. And if another situation like happened to those young men was going down, we probably would have intervened, and we could have ended up in the same situation as Mr. McKenzie, who spoke up and recorded it.
Yeah. So, Rye, why did you decide to say, "I'll do it"? Why jump in?
I thought it was a great idea, and I thought it was a way to speak out. I think I know that there's a lot of white people who don't believe that racial profiling or systemic racism exists. I think it's the minority, but there are definitely people, and I got some messages after this went viral. We got some messages about that. But I think even if you acknowledge that it exists, people don't say anything about it. People don't speak out about it and speak out against it. And even if that's all we accomplished is just to say, hey, we notice and we have a problem with this. It seemed like a worthwhile thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And Rebecca, you also, rose your hand and said, I'll do it, right? So is systemic racism something that you all as friends talk about?
Well, we see it. Unfortunately, it's a part of our, I hate to say daily life, but it's definitely there. And for me, it was I'll do it because I also think that we set by example. And one thing that we always tell our children is, if you see something wrong, stand up. If you see somebody being bullied, don't let it happen. So when I left, my kids asked me, where are you going? Why are you doing this? And I gave them very honest answers. And they gave me hugs and said, we're proud of you. Go do what you need to do. But I think you set by example. And if we want future generations, we want people to learn from it, but also future generations to not accept it. So I think you just set by example.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
8 and 10.
Mine are 9 and 11. Yeah. And, I started this whole idea of like raising equity for that reason. Like, we need to be raising kids to be the change that we want to see in the world. Like, we might not get it right. There's some of us who are trying, like you said, but if we don't, they need to be able to pick up where we left off and not be stumbling through just understanding these concepts or believing the kind of myth of color blindness that race doesn't matter. Like, oh yeah, maybe we could get there. But even I argue, I want you to see that I'm Black. Like, I don't want you to be blind to that. I want you to see it. And I want you to also relish and know your history. And so can we be who we are together? So I think it's beautiful that you're being honest with your kids. People sometimes say, oh, they're so young. Can you talk to them? I'm like, yeah, we've been talking about it.
That's when you do talk to them.
Right.
That's when you do. It's when they're young.
Right. And Sherry, how old are your kids?
25 and 23.
So did you have these conversations with them when they were younger?
They were born in the Netherlands. We lived in Europe for 8 years. So they were exposed to many, many different cultures and ways of life. So yes, this has always been on our radar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's a little more accentuated living in Memphis, though. Truly. And in the South.
Yeah. So when you came back from living in the Netherlands, did you locate in Memphis?
We moved back in 2000. And we lived in Kentucky briefly. And then we moved to Memphis in 2001.
So you've been in the South.
Yeah.
And sometimes people talk about, I'm here in St. Louis, which was, it is a very Southern state. But people sometimes say, oh, the North's different. Well, there's racism everywhere.
I think Memphis and St. Louis are very similar in a lot of ways.
Exactly, yeah.
Yes.
In fact, I've been saying with Dread for a while, I'm so afraid that Memphis is going to be the next Ferguson. Things that what blew up there could easily blow up here.
Really? So do you feel it in terms of what the dynamics between the police and the community?
A bit between everybody. The city is so segregated.
I think you can feel it anywhere. You can even feel it for me, sometimes even at work. I'm a physician, and when I was doing my residency, especially working in the inner city, and I'm from Vermont, so I had very little experience with any kind of race because I lived in a completely white environment. And then I moved to Memphis for residency, and I did have some situations where African American patients would look at me with suspicion or look at me like, you're treating me differently because I'm Black, or you don't believe me because I'm Black. And I was very confused about it when I first moved here. I'd never encountered anything like that before, but you just feel that racial tension all over the place in this city. I think it's a little bit better now that I'm no longer in the inner city and I'm working out in the suburbs. I don't feel it nearly as much, but there can still be some subtle tension there.
Sounds very much like St. Louis. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask is, it's clear that you all are understanding that systemic racism exists. And so that's not a question for you all. But what about the flip side? So the flip side of oppression is the privilege. Is that something that you all talk about with each other? Like the privilege that you have? And clearly that's what spurred you to do what you did, but do you use that word? Because sometimes for folks, it can be a lightning rod and a controversial term to use.
Not in casual conversations usually, no. I mean, we're going out to lunch, we're having girls' night. It's not, hey, let's talk about how privileged we are. But if current events comes up,
Yeah, I mean, I think we all pay attention to the news, and we stay updated on just events of the day, and a lot of them involve just wrong events, wrong occurrences of racism. And, that's what motivated us to do this. And it occurs daily. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, we don't necessarily get together and talk about it. I just met these two ladies when we were at the mall.
Neat.
Brought them together.
Yes. You did. You brought us all together.
That's great. One of the things I like to ask folks is when you first became aware of your privilege. Because oftentimes when we talk about racism, we'll talk about like the awful things that happen, whether it's the enslavement of Black people or the civil rights movement, but we often leave invisible the privileges that we get. So when did you in your life become aware, oh, like things are set up for me, things are built for me because I'm white?
I'll say it started in adulthood in my 20s, really. I was aware of discrimination growing up, but I still probably don't understand how deep it goes. And I'm conscious of that. But really, when I became a mom and started thinking about the life lessons I needed to teach my kids and realizing that the things I have to teach my white, blonde children are not completely the same as the things that my Black friends have to teach their children. We read the news, and when things like the Trayvon Martin shooting come up, I realized I will never have to have that talk with my sons, that you should never walk through a dark neighborhood with a hoodie up because someone might think that you're going to burglarize the place and you're going to get shot. I mean, that's just not something that I have to worry about. And I realized, oh my God, my Black friends, like they have to tell their 9 and 10-year-old boys probably that. And that's heartbreaking. It's just, it's not okay.
It's a daily concern for if you have young Black children.
Every day. And then hearing stories of, Black men friends who were terrified to drive through the city because, and their heart stops if they see a police car.
There's even a device that you can get to put on your driver's door so you can put your license and your ID and your insurance so you don't have to reach.
Oh, really? So it sounds like being in proximity or having relationships with people who experience discrimination is what helped you to see the privilege.
That's one thing I was talking about just a little bit ago is it wasn't, sadly, I knew about discrimination, but it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I really learned that I had this privilege. Because one of my friends was talking about how he had been driving and there had been a robbery, and because he's Black, the police naturally suspected him, and in their minds, naturally, obviously, and pulled him over. And I'm like, okay, you got pulled over. I mean, I've been pulled over. And he said, yeah. And then I looked at my rearview mirror, and the guns were drawn as they approached his car. Now, as a white woman, I can tell you I've been pulled over for speeding or whatnot, and not once has their guns been taken out of their holster when they approached me.
Right.
And I was like, oh my gosh. And that's when it hit me that we have this privilege, because he told me that this was not an isolated incident. So that just broke my heart. And that's when it dawned on me that we have this, that we didn't even realize we had.
I often use the analogy, it's kind of like a fish in water. You don't know you're wet. Like, what? Water? I'm just a fish. It's like that. It can be like that. And in terms of like being women, there's that intersectionality, right? Like we, as a Black woman or as a white woman, there's a lot about our identities that as women, we experience the discrimination. And then, like, how do you make sense of, I don't know if you all have talked about that together or have any thoughts about, how you navigate the privilege of being a white woman, but also the oppression and the disadvantage that can come with being a woman.
That's, as a female going into science and technology, being a chemistry major, and then going into a surgical specialty, I definitely see sides of that as well, especially women that want to go into surgery in general have a very hard time. They're definitely discriminated against, and they're definitely not treated well. But yeah, I think it's much worse for the African American females who are trying to get into any field of medicine, and surgical as well. But I think, almost change topic, my experience with when I really realized that racial profiling was a really big systemic problem has really been in the last couple of years, because cell phones and cell phone videos have become so easy. And it's one thing to read a story or to hear about something, but when you're seeing all of these videos and people start videoing all of these incidences and they start popping up on your Facebook feed, you just see them over and over. And I never really realized how big a problem it was until really the last several years.
I think that's a huge testament to people recording, and posting the recordings. There are times where I've heard people say, oh, everyone's recording everyone and it's a problem. But I think you speak to the power of that. Like when you show people what you're experiencing, or even like with Starbucks, there was a white woman there who, had the courage and leveraged her privilege, I would say, to know that she could record and wouldn't be arrested along with the two Black men, right? That's the only reason why we know about that. If the two Black men had said what happened, I don't think we would have had this same response, and that Starbucks would have taken a day off and done a training. I don't know what you all think.
Well, it also drives me crazy when I see these videos, and then if you start reading the comments, all the comments say, well, there must be more to the story. They must have done something right before the video started. Like, well, maybe they didn't. There must be more, because I think that there's people in a safe white bubble they want to put up mental blocks sometimes and not admit it's a problem, because if you admit it's a problem, then you might be forced to actually do something about it. And if you deny the problem exists, then you can just go back to your nice little safe world and keep living guilt-free.
So what would you all say if you could say something to other people about, if you're thinking about stepping out and leveraging your privilege, if you're thinking about standing up or saying something about something you see that you feel like is wrong, what advice would you give to them?
If you have Black friends, maybe talk to them about it.
Did you talk to people before you did it?
I did, yeah, to make
Your
sure
Black
I
friends.
wasn't being a clueless a-hole.
I was like, am I doing something really stupid here? Am I going to offend you in some way I'm not even aware of?
Right. Are we stepping into something we shouldn't?
And it was like, no, because if you're not an oppressed group, or if you are an oppressed group, you can't do this. And if people that aren't oppressed don't do this, it stays the same.
I'll give you an example. I did almost chicken out before we went to the mall. I didn't almost chicken out, but I did. I was a little nervous, and I took a Lyft, like an Uber car, to the mall from my home. And the driver who picked me up was an African-American lady. She's driven me before. She remembered me. She was like, hey, how's it going? She picked me up. We started driving in the car, and she said, "Why are you going to the mall in a Lyft car at night?" And I said, "Okay, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing, and you tell me if it's crazy." And I explain it to her, and she looks at me, and I'm thinking, "Oh, she's going to tell me I'm stupid." And she goes, "That is so great." She says, I can't speak up about it. She's like, my 3 kids, they can't speak up about it. And she's like, "I think that's so great that somebody cares enough to go do that and make this point." And so at that point, I was like, okay, well, it's on.
Yeah,
Right.
I kind of wish we had the name of the woman who took the picture. Because it was an African-American woman who took the picture. I'd love to give her photo cred.
The mom who took the picture that went viral.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, she's probably thinking, why is
I know.
nobody
She had no idea. Yeah.
Was she just somebody walking in the mall?
Yeah, we literally stopped a random stranger and said, "Please take a picture."
She was
of
with her
us.
kids playing video games, and but we had no idea that it was going to go viral.
No.
You know,
Right. No.
We
took one with the hood up and one with the hood down, and
we walked around the mall, and then I ran my mouth on Facebook, which I do all the time, and I don't know, and it was crazy. Like I thought maybe 100, 200 friends, like collective friends, would chime in and, respond or, say something. I posted it as I was getting on a plane and then shut my phone off. The plane landed and I turned my phone back on and I was like, holy shit. I did not expect at all. Did not expect at all the response that it got.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you all leveraging your privilege. And to me, it really embodies what I wanted this challenge to be about. So it was perfect timing. We didn't plan it at all, right? But it was perfect timing because people asked me, "Oh, well, what does that mean? What does that look like?" And I could say, yeah, these women, they had an idea, they saw something, and they took action. I have 2 more questions. One, do you all consider yourself allies? People use that term. Some people are even using the term accomplice now because they're saying, "Oh, well, that makes it sound like you're willing to really get in there rather than just an ally and stand by." Do you all consider yourself allies?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. I consider you allies in the fight against racism. Absolutely. What'd you say?
That's a compliment, I guess. Thank you.
Oh, yes. I mean, thank you, because they're right. As a person who's in an oppressed group, it's harder to speak out and not have people think it's self-serving, right? So as a woman talking about the pay gap, people are going to think, "Oh, you just want more money." Well, it's like, well, yeah, but there's a pay gap. So it takes
And you're not saying anything, then in a way you're condoning it. So I think we all care enough that we'll take the criticism because it's worth the risk of encouraging other people to speak up and make change. Yep. Silence is compliance and being complicit. Yeah, silence is complicit. So what's next for you all? Do you all have anything else planned as a group or individually?
We have this movie deal. We're working on this movie deal.
No. Waiting for another crazy idea to come along.
No, we don't. We don't have a plan.
We don't have a plan. Something will come up though.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I want to just say for folks who are gonna watch this. Oftentimes in moments like this, there's not a grand plan. And at least in Ferguson, one of the things that we started to think was actually a benefit the outside world criticized, the fact that it was a leaderless movement, the fact that there were people in different spaces taking action and not waiting for one person to, bless them with the permission to act. And so I think it's actually powerful. I feel like it's a really powerful time where people are feeling that they're able to act in small groups in their, what I would say, in their own space, right? Beverly Tatum, I don't know, have you all read the book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria and Other Conversations About Race? It's a good one. And she talks about knowing your sphere of influence, whether it's Sunday school or work or your home, where's your sphere of influence and how can you act in that space? And just people feeling or knowing that they can act and they don't have to have a grand plan, but they can know that they want to do something. So thank you for doing more than something.
Can I go back and add to the answer to the question, what would we say to others that we want to encourage them to leverage their privilege? I mean, it doesn't have to be something that people are going to see on social media. Small acts of kindness can go so far. If you see somebody being mistreated at a restaurant or a store, intervene, mediate for them.
Step up, speak out.
Not only for their benefit, but to set an example for other people who are just being silent and being complicit, right? And we see that all the time in our community. It's sadly, it happens a lot. Any opportunity to reach out and just be kind to people and, let them know that they have allies.
And what I like about what you all did is it highlighted the pattern of disparate treatment, right? So that rule isn't being enforced across races equitably. And so that idea of being kind, yes, but you really did shine a light on disparate treatment and the pattern of disparate treatment. And that's that push and pull that as a psychologist, I want people to understand their individual actions and their impact on others. But I also want them to see like the system and the pattern. And so I think what you did was to help people see that. Sherry, were you about to jump in and say something?
No, not really. I just, I don't know if I'm going to go to Wolf Chase Mall anytime soon. I think our faces are on posters there.
Oh, I thought you were going to say it's a boycott because they're treating people unfairly.
That too. Not like we want to go there, but
no, I'm not a mall shopper, but I'm sure they're looking out for us.
You think? Do you think?
I'm joking.
It might be.
Okay.
I just do like
I doubt we're very welcome there.
yeah, exactly.
But I do like the people that we don't even know.
Yeah.
Come up. People at my job that I might see once in a long, long time will come up to me and just thank me. It goes back to that allies. They just thank me. And it took a while for me to be able to even accept a thanks because it didn't feel like, and we still don't feel like we didn't do anything.
I didn't do anything.
All we did was
walk through the mall.
And our message is only what Black people have been saying, but nobody's been listening to them the entire time there's racial profiling, there's injustice. And so we didn't do anything. So these people just come up and just thank us and give us hugs and gratitude. And it's like, I want to give you, I'm sorry. Because really there's no thanking. This should never even exist. So it's overwhelming at moments.
Yeah. And that's how privilege is powerful and can operate. We're not even aware of it. Like we don't even realize we have it. Like you said, you don't feel like you did anything because you have I would say there's two, well, not I would say, but in the research, there's two kinds of privilege. It's unearned entitlements and conferred dominance. And unearned entitlements are those things that we should all be able to do, like go to the mall and wear a hoodie, right? So you all didn't do anything except for you have the privilege, this unearned entitlement of being able to be in the world and take up space that other people, Black people in particular, don't have. And then the conferred dominance is the one where we're given dominance over another group. So that might be like, family structure. Even though we passed the Same-Sex Marriage Act, there's a lot of ways in which same-sex partners still have discrimination, whether it's I'm not baking a cake for you or other things, right? So that's when like a group is given dominance or seen as better than others. And that's the kind of privilege we don't want to continue. But these unearned entitlements, like why can't everyone walk through the mall and take up space? Why couldn't Trayvon Martin walk in the neighborhood and have some Skittles and an iced tea, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, thank you for sharing. And that's why I wanted to just raise up what you all did, because I do thank you for having the courage to acknowledge your white privilege enough to do this thing, like you said, doesn't feel like anything, but it's huge in highlighting how privilege operates, because so often we just go to the stories of despair and discrimination, which, like you said, for some people, they don't believe it. They think you're exaggerating. They think you're making it up. But for you all to highlight how your privilege operates, it's powerful. It is. Anyone have any final thoughts they want to share?
No, I'm very much enjoying the content on your website and learning a lot. And I'm hoping that it triggers ideas of how to continue to be an ally, be a better ally. and, maybe have an idea for something else we can do.
Awesome. Well,
I'd like to give a shout out to Shannon though, because seriously, I mean, okay, we all have learned throughout our lives at whatever point about white privilege and about, society. But I didn't realize how many African Americans felt alone until they started approaching and saying thank you. So, and I still to this day would not have known this had Shannon not sent that blast out saying who wants to join me. So thank you.
Thank you for joining me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot
Thanks for
there.
being brave. And thanks for coming, even though you thought there was maybe a small chance you might end up in jail.
well, there are some things worth being put in jail over, worth getting trouble.
And we all would have gone,
Yeah.
and we would have stuck
We
by
would
what
have
we
been
did.
out pretty quick.
Yeah, and honestly, it would have been less sad if we had gone to jail, because at least, we would have been wrong, right? Like
Right.
the rule would have been
Applied.
enforced consistently,
Yeah.
and we'd have been like, oh, well,
We
okay,
were.
maybe it's not as bad as we thought, but yeah.
And that's where some of the hope lied, in a sense, the optimism, the naiveness of it. It was just, okay, well, maybe I will be arrested because maybe it will be.
Maybe.
Small chance. And just wasn't
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining me. I know being busy people, professional women, it's not easy to find a time where 4 people can be together. So I appreciate you all, making the effort. And please do be in touch on my webpage, and you have my contact info, and I will let you know. We're probably going to try to push this out pretty soon. Because it's timely, and I feel like 'tis the season, right? We're in this time of year where people are wanting to be kind to each other and spread love. So let's leverage the hell out of our privilege.
Yeah.
New Year's resolutions.
New Year's resolutions, and yep. I was just thinking, I didn't know how to say this tactfully, but white people love to do random acts of kindness stuff during the holidays, and
Yes.
so yeah,
1 month a year.
maybe we inspire a little bit. Just
That's
Something.
anything. Speak up.
Yeah.
Be an ally.
That's
be
what
a
I'm
friend.
hoping.
Yeah.
Really. And it's not, I don't think it's, so St. Louis, this fun fact, the year that Mike Brown was killed, fun and tragic, the year that Mike Brown was killed, 2014, St. Louis was one of the most philanthropic cities in the country, right? The philanthropy through the roof. I think the Catholic Church and that environment is part of that, but just really a giving city. And the Ferguson uprising, right? So this balance of, okay, can we be targeted in our spirit of giving and how we serve people and maybe be with people and change the root cause of why things are bad rather than just do kind things, right? There's been a real conversation in St. Louis around the juxtaposition with our philanthropy and our systemic racism. So yeah, maybe Memphis, like you said, Memphis and St. Louis have a lot to maybe learn from each other. Yeah. Well, thank you all. And have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Thank
Thank you.